You know, one of the things that you touched on this morning, Tim, was the responsible use of these powerful surveillance tools and who you're selling to and how they're used. You know, what was the impetus for this? You know, creating the Copenhagen Clause, as you mentioned, and you know, what do you believe Milestone's role is in governing the responsible use of your software?
Well, I think anytime you're making technology that's used in the broader marketplace, you need to balance innovation with how it's used through the channel and into the market. And for us, we've always had a position on what the ethical use of technology should be. But I think the conversation in the global marketplace has heightened in recent times, and that happened to coincide with some work that Lars, our CEO, was doing on the Copenhagen letter, along with many other leaders from around the world. And so those things connected at just the right time. We were able to then use that Copenhagen letter as a backdrop for language that we could adapt in what we call the Copenhagen Clause, which is a subset of language that we're utilizing in various forms within our organization. And I think, just to add to that, I think the angle that we never know how our technology is going to be used, and the technology in and of itself can't decide if it's being used for good or bad. And that's left to the humans. And whenever we have humans involved, we should have some parameters and guardrails that we try to police ourselves with, even if it's guidelines that we recommend into the broader marketplace.
Was this focus on responsible use? Was it aimed at anyone in the industry in particular?
That's a fair question, but by no means was it targeted in such a way. I think that when you talk about responsible use, it's better not to target any particular country or company or product. That becomes pretty laser focused and hard to adapt from that position. Instead, you should take broader language, recognizing that as we have this conversation in the Americas, it might be different in the US than it is somewhere else in the Americas, or around the world. Inevitably, the conversation is different in EMEA than it is in APAC, than it is here in Nashville today.
And Tim, what exactly does the Copenhagen Clause entail?
Well, I called out some elements in the presentation today, talking about that innovation shouldn't be above the people. It's fascinating what we can build, but we shouldn't disconnect those two pieces. And that we should take into account the needs of society, also in addition to the needs of technology and how we're trying to solve problems in the marketplace. So moving from a human-centric design to more of a humanity-centric design. I think some of those elements make a lot of sense. And of course, asking the question, who do we sell to, and how do they use our products? And those are relevant questions in the conversation.
And what will be your mechanism for determining when the clause is violated, and how will offenders be punished?
Well, great question. And of course, we abide by guidelines that are set out from the United Nations. There's certain countries that you should stay away from that are violators of human rights. Nothing's changed in that regard. In the Copenhagen letter, there begins to be some language that you can look back on of what to do if you find your technology is being used in the wrong way. And I think that's the next step, the next iteration in the conversation that we should have together in our own community as we think about what to do when we see that things are being abused. And oftentimes, from manufacturer through the channel and down to the end customer, you lose track of where your software or your products are being used. And from time to time, you discover them in places you wish they weren't. And it's then that we need to react and talk amongst ourselves to find a way to remedy those situations to the best of our ability, recognizing that there's a lot of hands involved in taking solutions all the way to the end customer.
And getting back to one of the other key themes from this morning with respect to cloud, and one of the things that you discussed was the need to dispel some misconceptions about Milestone as it relates to the cloud. So, where do these misconceptions stem from, and why was it important for you to, specifically address this?
That's a fair question. As I said from the stage, sometimes I see things written about us or hear things in the broader marketplace, and I use those as talking points in my presentations. I don't always remember where I see them, but they do kind of stick with me. And in that case, I have seen the statement that we're sitting out cloud. I don't recall where I read it, but it did resonate with me because I knew internally that actually wasn't true, but our official position hadn't come out into the public. And so I thought today was a good opportunity to clarify on those points and use some of those provocative statements to make the point that I wanted to, that we're stepping forward, we're being more public, we're recognizing not only where we see Milestone, where we see the journey to cloud unfolding, but also our relationship with Arcules in California.
And can you explain in greater detail the hybrid cloud approach that Milestone is taking, and what will that look like for the company moving forward?
So with respect to hybrid cloud, I think that I can't really explain that in detail because as we unpack the traditional client-server VMS, we will discover over time what that looks like. What I was attempting to communicate today is technology innovation takes time, and it takes time to play out both in the development of new things, but also the adoption in the broader marketplace. And so using the metaphor of a journey really articulates how I see the time unfolding. I think that looking forward, there will be lots of opportunities in unpacking client-server VMS to add online services and capabilities to augment what we do today. It's a natural transition from perpetual licenses to adding elements on the journey to cloud. Even as others, like Arcules, are taking a different approach to sort of skirt around that and go all the way in different ways.
And speaking of Arcules, how does having a company like Arcules in the corporate family, impact your strategy and your roadmap in the cloud area?
So, just to say it briefly as well, my background is coming from Milestone, and I always think with a bigger picture or better together type of mentality. I think it impacts the roadmap in the sense, like Tim said, we can be a front runner, we can innovate, we can operate with a lot more freedom, yet it's in my interest to make sure that we together build a solution that takes our end customers and our partners to where we're ultimately going. And then sometimes that will be a pure SaaS play, and sometimes, or most of the cases today, it will be some form of hybrid. And what we want to do now is to make sure that we collaborate as a technology partnership with Milestone to build the optimum hybrid solutions together.
And it's been nearly a year since Arcules made its soft launch at ISC West. How has your cloud offering been received, and what have you learned thus far from the market, and how will that impact your strategy moving forward?
So one thing I got wrong, if I start there, I thought that we would have a bunch of partners coming and really wanting to go cloud day one. What actually ended up happening was almost the reverse. We had end customers coming to us and really wanted to have a solution, and we didn't have the partners that understood cloud, or they were not familiar with the concept. So again, I want to say that today I think that change started, and that's better for both of us. The other thing that we really learned quickly is just because you've been building a product and a roadmap for one target segment doesn't mean that that's the buyers. So we said we are optimum at 10 to 20 cameras, and that's where we are optimum. That's where the product really works in mid-market, and then over time going up more and more enterprise. But we also got a lot of IT type of integrators and end customers that have their own big IT staff that looks to deploy bigger systems as well. And that's where we see an opportunity. If we can't solve it ourselves, we see a big opportunity to pull Milestone into a lot of the headquarters. So that was not, I thought that picture would look a little bit different looking back 12 months.
And I think to add to that, if I can, that's the synergy we see in making this message together. That even though Arcules and Milestone are completely separate companies, we don't share sales quotas or commissions or business models whatsoever. But we can see that in the marketplace, our solutions complement one another.
Yeah.
And I think that will be true for a very long time. And so for system integrators and customers to be able to take advantage of the two disciplines together, I think makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Together we always have a solution that will work for the end customer. That's the key point.
What do you think are some of the biggest misconceptions about the cloud, in the video surveillance industry?
So the biggest one I met is cloud have a latency of 10 to 40 seconds. Not true. Cloud have a latency 2 seconds. Even in some cases it's closer to 1 second. It's almost as fast as an on-prem. The other misconception is that people still think they have a 2 megabit uplink. That's what they might have had at home, and then they think that will never be able to work with video. That's not the case today. Many companies today have fiber. A lot of the cloud platform, public cloud vendors have been pushing fibers all the way out to the tier 1 internet service providers. So the last mile is very short, and as a result, you basically get full speed straight into the data centers. And that's why, like I said, we have seen customers can run 150, 200 cameras on a single location with full HD resolution. So that's a big misconception. Another one is that I often hear is it's more or less cyber secure, but I actually partly disagree with that because we push out updates twice a week, and if there is a security issue, it's fixed. If we learn about it in the morning, at lunch it's fixed. So that's a misconception that it's not safe enough, and that we've definitely been trying to educate our partners with for a long time.
Yeah, and I think on that point, people are starting to get that.
Yeah.
And recognize that it may actually be more secure.
Yeah. Unless if you have most on-site deployments I have seen, you have a partner that knows what they're doing, locking things down on the network. But we've also seen that a lot of don't, and that's where cloud is even more secure. Then everything we built is cybersecurity by design from day one, just to make sure everyone understands the importance of security.